Welcome to AI, Government and the Future, a podcast by Corner Alliance. We explore the intersection of artificial intelligence, government and the future. We work with government to create results. We ignite your agency's mission by helping you to design and implement high-impact and innovative federal programs in AI, broadband, cybersecurity, public safety, and more. Being a government ally is at the core of all we do.
Welcome back to AI Government in the Future. I'm your host, Max Romanik, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Ismael Kherroubi García to the show. Ismael is a leading voice in AI ethics and research governance, as well as the founder and CEO of Kairoi, a consultancy specializing in addressing the ethical implications of artificial intelligence and shaping responsible AI governance frameworks. His thought leadership extends to initiatives like his project, An Incomplete History of AI, which explores artificial intelligence's historical and societal dimensions. Today, we'll explore the crucial topic of AI literacy, what both legislators and the public need to know about AI to navigate its complexities responsibly. Ismael will share his unique perspective on how historical context, ethical frameworks, and cross-disciplinary collaboration can guide us towards a more informed and inclusive AI governance. Welcome to the show, Ismael.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. As a means of getting us started, I'd love to start by delving into a bit of your journey as the founder of Kairoi and a leader in the AI ethics and research governance space. What initially inspired you to dedicate your career to exploring the ethical implications of artificial intelligence?
What a wonderful question to start off with. I thought long and hard about this one. The journey is by no means straightforward, and I think a lot of people would love to be in the space. And just heads up, don't worry. If you really care about this stuff, just keep moving forward. So I studied business initially, worked in fintech, worked in human resources. None of that made much sense to the ultimate thing I'm in. But between 2019 and 21, I worked at the Alan Turing Institute, which is the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science. And I took care of establishing what in the UK we'd call a research ethics committee, what in the States and Canada we'd call an institutional review board. So the goal there was to apply a quite common governance mechanism that we find in universities, looking at the ethics of medical research to the context of AI and data science research. So my work there was to articulate the values of the Alan Turing Institute. We had a huge framework already out there that was easy to pick up. We had internal practices about open science, so I picked those up and ultimately ended up with not too burdensome documents, I hope, but every research project would have to go through this process, fill in a form, have a conversation with a board of ethics reviewers. What to me was most interesting with my, I'd say, organizational kind of background was to see that what mattered most wasn't having the piece of paper on the intranet and saying, right, everyone go there, do that. What was most important was to build a relationship with the researchers to understand, to help them understand why this matters, but also to understand why this sometimes is a bit of a burdensome process for them, and ultimately drive some culture change from what was a traditional academic environment to which can be quite, find the burden of the ethics process quite frustrating, to a culture where people were literally seeking out our help. We weren't there as a research ethics committee to be a pain, but to help research be better. So that to me was the starting point, and ever since, here I am now speaking with you.
That's fantastic. I love stories that are non-traditional backgrounds. I myself am sort of afflicted similarly. My undergraduate work was in art history, and then I was in finance for a little while. I'm a lawyer by training, and now here I am in this AI government consulting sort of space, and I think that people that come at it from a sideways angle usually have a different perspective. And it's nice to have a more rounded, full picture of any sort of topic space. So that's great.
That for me is so important. I think very often AI ethics is put to the AI ethicist, whatever on earth that is. I honestly don't know what that is. I wouldn't put that name, that tag on my own work. But it's put to an individual, whereas what I think matters is that it is a collaborative process where we all learn from each other. So to me, ultimately, AI ethics really necessitates different perspectives. So, of course, I'm saying that you and me, we have the perfect background because it's not straightforward. We're not pure data scientists, we're not pure philosophers, historians, whatever. But we do need that richness. We can't have the data scientist doing something, the philosopher doing something completely different. We need to be talking across, across fences, across.
And certainly as we get closer to something approximating sort of an AI general intelligence, I don't think that sort of shoehorning it into an AI ethicist, to your point, is going to be helpful. The whole point of general intelligence is general applicability, so cross discipline, cross spectrum, and making sure that you would have ethics and those sorts of things that apply at that general level. Yeah, you're going to have to draw from multiple sources. Otherwise, you're necessarily going to be sort of mono in your point of view, and that won't serve people for very long, or you'll get really biased outcomes, which is sort of what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. More collaboration, all for it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So digging into the heart of the matter of the day, we're starting to see technologies like generative AI, deep fakes, all of that sort of stuff becoming a lot more pervasive. And so public misconceptions and misinformation about these tools are on the rise due to their popularity. From your perspective, what do you see as some of the more pressing areas where misunderstanding among the general public is starting to have a big effect?
I think even tap into what the general public is. But in the UK, historically, we've had a public perspectives tracker, which has been looking at what the public feel about AI. And from what I recall in early years, I think it kind of persists is the usual word cloud of what do you feel about AI. The word fear or fear tends to be quite up there. I think generally, and I don't think this is only the general public, I think it's across governments, across organizations, big tech, and everyone. We tend to have quite a strong dichotomy between those who are fearful and those who are very excited about AI. Last year, 2023, if you recall, there was a huge letter that was put out there by the Future of Life Institute calling for a pause on giant AI, on big AI models, I think they called them. And that fed into fear. There was no way around it. And it was actually technically informed by fear, but a lot of the signatories are also well known to be driving the excitement about AI. So it's this very strange polar opposition that came together in this one band of signatories saying, yes, we're afraid of it, but also it's so exciting. It could be the best thing that happens to us. Artificial general intelligence or AI at a global scale or something. I think that dichotomy, which lacks any nuance, is the most pervasive bit of misinformation out there. If we look at any tool, we can dig a lot deeper into what's going on, into how it works, into who uses it, who develops it, what their motivations were. Whereas if we just stand back, here's a fun task for anyone listening. If you go to Google, obviously a different tab, don't close this. If you go to Google Images and look for AI, you're going to find blue brains. You're going to have, my favorite image is a robot on a laptop, and it just makes no sense. It's either fear-mongering or very exciting. The most exciting one is it's a continuous one. You'll more or less recognize it if I describe it. It's a human hand and a robot hand joining in the sky.
Creation of man, Michelangelo, Sistine ceiling style. Yep.
That image is saying we're going to achieve something godlike. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't think we will. But if that's what's going to happen in the coming decades or centuries, fine. Right now, we have real things going on. We have AI tools that are part of the quite negative experiences of many people. We have earlier in 2024 a teenager taking their life because of their interactions with a chatbot. We have plenty of people being sued over this stuff. I think those are the things we should be focused on. And that dichotomy that can feed into great conversations, really interesting stuff, that to me is very distracting from what really matters.
So, do you think that this is something that governments or their educational systems should be approaching and addressing, or is it more of a cultural phenomena or some fusion of the group? Like, where are you thinking the most good can happen here?
Yeah, I love that question. I wish I had an answer. I think for me, it is very much about the education system. At the moment, I mean, it's even hard for, for us who were in school, maybe just a decade or two ago, to think no one spoke to me about AI, no one spoke to me about machine learning, any of it, when machine learning was very much a thing when I was at school, but it was never part of the curriculum. Technology was never part of my school curriculum. It's been as I've grown and sought other routes of interest that I found out more about it. So at present, to what degree is AI machine learning a part of the education of curriculum, of K-12 curricula and so on? From what I understand, it is lacking. But what I know will be lacking is, even if you teach at school, at university, how machine learning works, what unsupervised, supervised, semi-supervised reinforcement learning, what convolutional neural network. If you learn all of this technical stuff, all the statistics, all the coding, all of that, you're still going to lack or you are likely to lack the critical evaluation skills to reflect on the societal implications of these tools, to reflect on, I said before, the motivations of these tools being put out there. So for me, I do think education is a big part, but I think that education needs to be interdisciplinary. It can't just be data science. It needs to include sociology of technology. It needs to include the history of technology. It needs to include philosophy of technology. So I do believe education is a big part of the solution. I think the cultural phenomenon, maybe it is a phase. There was the AI winter back in the, I'm going to say 70s, 80s, when people started realizing there were limits to what was then called symbolic AI. But there's a lot of money going into it now. And the money going into it is coming from very large organizations, important people, powerful people, who I don't think are going to just accept losing their investments over next year. I think there will be a push to continue driving this dichotomy, which is a great marketing tool, and that education needs to happen. So, yeah.
I love the answer. I want to dig in on some of the details a little bit more, especially some of the historical perspectives and the sort of the cross disciplinary collaborations and everything. The thing that always sticks in my mind is that famous quote about those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. This feels very salient to where we find ourselves these days. When looking at historical insights, where do you think that will help contextualize current challenges like bias and data privacy and accountability for people that are really engaged in this space?
I started in this space establishing a research ethics committee and doing research early on at Kairoi. One of the first projects was getting out a research paper with the Ada Lovelace Institute and the Alan Turing Institute and the University of Exeter. There was a lot of people. We looked at the application of research ethics committee processes to the context of AI. And what I found most interesting, I think I went down a bit of a tangent, was the history of research ethics committee. So the Hippocratic Oath is the first thing we think of when we talk about medical ethics, right? We think of this thing from ancient Greece where doctors had to sign up to do no harm or something like that. Fast forward to World War II and Nazi Germany and Nazi science, where many atrocities were conducted for the sake of quote unquote science. The response to that was the Nuremberg Code in 1947, which had it had 10 principles. It's a super short document, I think. But the first principle is on consent. It's on voluntary consent. So 1947, they're already saying we need the consent of the people we do medical research on. Now, that concept has evolved massively since 1947. We saw it again in the Helsinki Declaration in 1964. Helsinki Declaration was most recently, as of this recording, it was most recently updated October 2024. So we're still using these huge, important, seemingly historical, but very contemporary documents to inform the ethics of medical science. And I really do believe that those many documents and what the many processes that led to those documents show us is one way forward for AI ethics. These declarations and codes aren't necessarily enshrined in law. So the US does have, I think it was 1974, the National Research Act, which enshrined institutional review boards in law. So in the US, they're very heavily regulated, and medical science being as serious as it is globally, it is now heavily regulated. But to me, the Research Ethics Committee as something which doesn't need to be exactly regulated and has the flexibility to deal with very different types of research projects is a really interesting option for today's AI and tomorrow and the near future's AI. I think regulation is great. But there are already a lot of laws out there on privacy, of course, on medical health devices and so on data protection. But with AI being such a fast-moving space, it's okay to create more flexible research ethics committees or institutional review boards or something like that, which we do find in places like everyone can have an opinion on whether it's good enough, but Google DeepMind have one, Stanford University, I think, have a great one. When we ran our own work with the Ada Lovelace Institute, the Meta, a colleague from Meta came in. So it's something that can work again, and that's next part of the question. Across organizations, it doesn't need to be only within government departments. It can also be in academia. It can be in industry.
Yeah, and I really like the idea. I'm always intrigued by applying a commonplace practice in one industry or sector to an industry where it's new. So, like you say, in medical research, institutional review boards are the modus operandi. It is expected. But when you have, say, a large financial institution using an AI model to determine fitness for securing a home loan, that is not the sort of thing you normally put through an IRB. Maybe it should be.
I mean, I think it's all up for debate. Like, I'm more than happy for the big financial institution to reach out and let's figure it out together.
I think it'd be fascinating. At least have the conversation with them, expose them to some ideas maybe that are not commonplace in their normal day to day.
For me, so I speak of meaningful public engagement as one of the 4 pillars of responsible AI. For me, meaningful public engagement in industry often sounds like run a focus group, do your usual marketing stuff. But I think that rather than it being a marketing tool, it can be a tool for building trust in the process of developing these tools. So if big financial institution um, went to clients, and the thing with a bank is the clients are, unless you're, Goldman Sachs or whatever. Can I say names? I don't know. Unless you're one of those big banks with institutional clients, your clients are probably pretty diverse. If you're able to bring a diverse group of customers or potential customers into the conversation, whether you're using a new tool for loan calculations, maybe you're an insurance company using data in certain ways, rather than us doing guesswork at, are they using AI? The usual one is, oh, my phone showed me an advert for the water bottles the other day because I was talking about water bottles at home. Rather than guessing at, is there AI going on here? Wouldn't it be great if the company said, there's AI here, we use it right, we use it with your consent, and we care about its impacts on you, rather than, I didn't get the loan. Is that because the AI, whatever?
I mean, what a nice way to foster trust in whatever the institution is that you are interacting with. To your point about education happens at a lot of different levels. It's not just necessarily a government program or our formal education system. That would be these institutions saying, oh, we're quite happy to educate our future customers around how to best interact with us in the future. The net positives there are good. And I sort of operate under a general rule that anytime you bring a transparency measure forward, those that are fighting against it are benefiting from the shadow in some way. Usually not for good reason. And, that's like, it's like interpersonal relationships. Those who protest to a boundary are benefiting from the absence of the boundary. This would be easily applicable in the same space. And I think, it's highly relevant. And so I'm always skeptical when an idea like that comes forward and an insurance company, a bank, a defense contractor, whatever is like, oh, no, we are not going to, almost always under the guise of that's our competitive advantage. It's like, well, it could also be manipulation, fraud, something unethical, etc. And by not answering the question, you are certainly opening the possibility for nefarious answers to that question to actually exist.
I found it recently again. I mean, it's kind of old news. Algorithms today often work as black box models, right? Which just means that they're opaque. And I find that to be the excuse for not being able to have more human oversight. And it's like the excuse, no, we can't do any better because that's how statistics works. Cutting edge technology doesn't allow us to do better. And I find that frustrating because what you can do is audit the AI lifecycle from design to development to deployment. What data did you choose? What model or process machine learning technique did you choose? How are you deploying these tools? All these questions rely on are answered by decisions or value judgments made by people or organizations, or enabled by people or organizations. So for me, being able to audit that completely undermines or does away with the fact that it's a black box model. I don't really care that it's black box. That's how they work. But you can still tell us who made what decision where and what data went into it. Transparency is so tricky, so tricky.
The regulation of black box models is certainly something that is a topic that comes up on our show quite a bit. And, you just presented one of the first sort of middle ground perspectives on that I've heard. Normally, Normally it's, well, as a regulator, we need to force transparency, pull the covers back on that black box model, show us what's inside. Or this is just how this works. And so any regulation like that is going to stifle innovation, and we might as well just stop developing these things right now. I don't like it when it balkanizes in these extreme polarized examples. Yours is at least taking the 2 points on that continuum and dragging them a little closer together to say we don't need the specific details, but give us enough information so that we can have some modicum of a prayer of understanding how it works, so that we, the consumer, can make an educated decision about how we want to interact with that. For consumer stuff, cool. But the same models and the same response are coming with national security applications, surveillance systems, things that are a little more concerning to the public good. And so I'd love a little bit more detail from you in terms of, like, if it was going to be regulatory, what would that look like? Or if it was just going to be sort of a public-private partnership consortium saying, this is how we think this is going to work for the best. Like, where do you land on that? What sort of advice would you give people who are wrestling with that?
Thinking about this one for a bit, analogies are always great. So again, online and you look for AI and you get a blue brain. That is an analogy. It's trying to explain. It's a heuristic. What is AI? It's a blue brain. Whatever that means, it isn't. But for this case, for regulation and regulating difficult things, finances might be contentious, but what about how we regulate cars, how we regulate driving vehicles and so on? Now, I don't actually know this, but I'm going to guess that the lawyers regulating traffic and so on don't have a degree in engineering and don't know exactly how the motor of vehicles operate.
I can guarantee that 100% of them do not, but some portion might. Having gone to school with a lot of them, I promise you they are not engineers by training.
So that's that, right? And even myself, I'm thinking these days cars look so much different. I've also moved from Europe to North America, where you all drive automatic, and that to me is like, how is this working if I'm not selecting the gear? But they're also computerized now. You lift the dashboard and it's just cables. It's like, well, where's the oil? It's electric. We don't need to understand how the machine works to legislate it, right? When I go on the road, if I skip a red light, that's a fine. If I bump into another car from behind, that's my insurance needing to kick in. If someone else hits me and we have an argument, we'll take it to court. Alternatively, if it's found that my car was faulty from the start, maybe it's part of a recalled vehicle and the manufacturer needs to step in. My insurance will step in, my insurance broker will step in. There are all of these things that are in place that surround an otherwise black boxy thing, which is, how on earth does my automatic electric vehicle work? I don't know. But if I do something wrong, I will be held accountable. My insurance might be held accountable. The person who hit me might be held accountable. The manufacturer might be held accountable. That's one part of the answer. It's look to the fact that we're already legislating very complex things. Another one is bring it back home and say, right, let's not do legislation. Let's look at our toasters. I love toasters. I use this analogy for what we often call trustworthy AI. So for me, the word trustworthy doesn't make sense in the context of AI, because I trust my family, I trust my friends, I trust you not to edit this video and make me look like a clown, right? We trust people to do things, but I don't trust my toaster in the same way. I don't have a familial relationship with my toaster. What I trust is that the little CE mark at the bottom means that it meets certain European standards. It's not going to blow up. I trust myself. I'm not going to fidget with a fork inside it. I'm not going to use it in the bathroom. And I trust that if something does go wrong, if it did blow up the house insurance will kick in and so on. Trust is another interesting term, which I think needs to be dialed down when we talk about AI. What we're trusting isn't the tool, but all the mechanisms sort of padding the tool.
And so from that perspective too, like it's interesting to look at, AI is more of an assemblage of, there's the model, there's the training of the model, there's the data sources that you use to train the model, then there's the outputs, what it's used for, and you can craft a regulatory regimen really around any of them, and where you draw the line is going to matter a lot. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, it's sort of like you can keep your black box model, but we care a lot about the output, or we care a lot about how you've trained it. And so we're going to put our thumb there. So don't tell us what's inside, but tell us what went in the first time so that we can have a prayer of understanding. Oh, if that's the data that it was trained on, then here's the sort of universe of potential outcomes. We don't have to worry about your black box AI model for determining loan fitness, because targeting packages for our adversaries is not part of that model. Like that, we don't have to be concerning ourselves with that sort of thing. But, are you disproportionately favoring, one ethnic group or another in your, well, now we care.
I think part of this, going back to the question of AI literacy, is reminding people that AI is not a tool that popped out of the vacuum. It's something where people went to work together, where money was funneled into this endeavor, where people make decisions and people use it, and people use it correctly or incorrectly. I do wonder if there's anything in law school about the fact that we regulate people and not things. I don't know. But for me, it's about the governance of people. So again, taking it back down from policy to organizations, I will talk to the culture of the people within an organization rather than the tools that they're using. We don't need to trust the tool. We need to trust how it was built. We need to be able to audit how it was built, have your usual procurement due diligence process. That's not different. And have your usual policies in place to make sure people use things adequately. I'm throwing all the analogies at you, but the other one is the same way we have in the workplace those policies that tell us if we're moving boxes to bend our knees and tuck, right? This really silly policy, which is like, I know how to pick boxes up, but that's a policy at work. If you're in facilities, more likely. But if you're moving your desk or whatever, you might have seen it. Why don't we have, increasingly we do, but why don't we have the same sort of policy or education piece within the organization around AI?
What strikes me too about what you're saying is that, like, you are simplifying concepts to make them generally more understandable for people who don't have a specialization in this area. And then it gives a common language for being able to raise this is a concern versus this is not really an issue here. But because humans, we can't seem to help ourselves. If we are going to simplify something, we're in danger of oversimplifying it. If we're going to raise an alarm, we're in danger of alarmism. Where have you found success in helping people draw the line between, we have to break this down because not everybody on this IRB is going to be a data scientist with 15 years of experience doing this, but in so doing, we are potentially adding fuel to the fire of the people who really don't understand, and they're going to start screaming, this is Terminator, and their machines are going to come hunt you down in your beds. Because like the line between seems to blur very, very quickly and sometimes unexpectedly. I mean, if it's anything you have experience with, have you encountered this sort of thing where, in the functions that you've been operating, you've had to either dial someone back a little bit, or you've said, okay, I've tried to simplify this, but now it maybe went a little too far, and we're now actually not in the realm of factually correct information anymore?
I don't think I've seen it with my analogies. I think I've seen it with others' analogies. So the Terminator being the most straightforward one, that will lead to alarmism. Other things, Frankenstein, whatever, we can always go to the life we have imbued in artifacts and therefore AI like that. I think the oversimplification, rather than oversimplification, what I might talk of is narratives or fictions which serve as important heuristics, but they haven't been devised by, well, now I'm going to put too much emphasis on what I do, but they haven't been devised for the purpose of responsible AI. They've been devised for something else. So, The Terminator, great film. Arnold Schwarzenegger, excellent at playing a robot. That's it. It's a great piece of entertainment. Let's not take it beyond that. The challenge is that those are heuristics that we all share. We all go to culture first. We all share culture. We all share music, films, books, whatever. And it's a lot easier to say, oh, AI like the Terminator. Whereas what we need, the challenge for me is when I'm in the room to say, great film. We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about algorithms which are created by people in the real world, and rely on data and data architectures and features and metadata and so on. This is very technical data science stuff. Let's move away from the Terminator. I think if I found that my stories about the car or the toaster became challenging, I look forward to sorting that one out on the spot. I don't know.
Certainly not any objection to your stories or analogies or examples. I find them to be quite helpful and exactly, the right minded way of looking at this. Where I encounter some of those more alarmist sort of areas are people that are not fully understanding what the thrust of the AI system is and what it's about. And I usually try to challenge them, sort of like Noah Harari's work, by saying, isn't it a little scarier when you have a highly intelligent but non-sentient algorithm controlled by a small number of people manipulating your decisions into choosing something that is not in your best interest? Isn't that a little scarier and more realistic to what we are encountering? And like, that would be a misuse of that work, but it's a very powerful person with not a lot of ability to challenge it. And so that's where some of the ethics, the institutional review boards, the abilities to understand how it's operating, educating the public, that seems to me how you fight back against some of that stuff, where at least you can recognize when it's operating in your life and then make some informed decisions around whether or not you care to continue to interact with it, or for, legislators, regulators, they can determine whether or not that is a use that is in the public interest and whether or not they want to continue it, or if they want to eliminate that in some way, shape, or form. Like, that's where I've seen the rubber meets the road. But, in a consulting practice, I have a very different perspective on it than someone with your background, where you focus more directly on it. And so that's part of why you have a more educated and nuanced perspective on it than I do. And so I really enjoy hearing some of these new ideas coming forward for the benefit of our listeners. You've had a lot of time and experience trying to work with tactics to help foster some of this collaboration so that you can have that more holistic and well-rounded perspective on it. What sort of tactics have you seen that have been particularly effective or generated outcomes that you thought were really positive?
So the biggest endeavor, and it is still going on. It started May 2023. It's called the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Network. I run it out of the Royal Society. Wait, it's a long name. Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, Manufactures and Commerce, the RSA in London. We're 30,000 fellows, and I established the Responsible AI Network, so RAIN. May last year, formalized, May 2023, formalized February 24. We have 600 people in the group. About 20 or so are quite active members. And the most wonderful thing about the group is that there are artists, there are historians. I'm sure we have art historians as well. There are data scientists, there are people working on astronomical sciences, where we have, so I'm trying to think, we have way too many things going on, and it's wonderful. We have artists, we have everyone. And the challenge is still there. I'm not going to present this as straightforward. We have very different perspectives, different views. what's been wonderful to see is that people who have no background in AI have wonderful insights. I'll tell you a story from one of our fellows. We ran an event November 2024. So I'll say her name. She's Gwen Haberman. She's wonderful. She told us the story of taking her little boy to a museum where the exhibition was an artist who'd created AI-generated animals and AI-generated mushrooms and plants. And the child was stunned, like, wow, this is beautiful. This is amazing. The child literally, we have the recording, so I'm not making it up. The child says, I could look at this all day. And then Gwen is saying, I'm not sure about that, darling. None of this is real. So they have this amazing interaction where the child is saying, but it's so cool. I could look at it forever. And apparently a year on from that interaction, the little one still watches TV and says, is that AI? Is that real? Is that AI? For me, that was a wonderful story that was only possible because there was a space to hear from different perspectives. You don't need to be a Nobel Prize winner to have really good insight on AI. And creating this space through the RSA, through the fellowship, for me is really important. And key to making this work is having a sense of humility and knowing that others have a lot to say and that sometimes your own perspective is limited. That to me is crucial.
That's a great example, and certainly something that I hope starts to gain more popularity, because I do see how the collection of diverse perspective will start to shore up some of those blind spots and help identify areas of need, like this needs attention. Sometimes it's hard to identify bias if you haven't been the victim of said bias before. It's not necessarily obvious, except for when it is. And so making sure that perspective is represented does a world of good for being able to identify what areas really require our attention. We are coming close to the end of time, and I always like to end these things in the same way. Our listeners are sort of disproportionately in that legislative, regulatory, government services kind of space. And so I like to give our guests the opportunity to provide them with any sort of advice or areas of focus, thoughts of wisdom that can help them prosecute their responsibilities as they move forward. And so from your frame of reference, what would you guide some of those folks in this space? What advice can you give them in helping them to be better at their areas of responsibility?
I think in the space of AI, meaningful public engagement will continue to be crucial, but also you're experts in legislation, embrace that. You already know a lot about data privacy law, consumer protection law, and so on. That still applies to AI. AI is very often a marketing tool. So remember that when you get that new case or you have that new challenge, it's the technology has a new name, but we've been legislating technology for many, many years. But, also reach out to me if you have any questions.
Ismael, thank you so much for your thoughts and wisdom today. This was a really great conversation. And to the rest of our listeners, we'll see you next time.
AI, Government and the Future is brought to you by Corner Alliance. To find out more about Corner Alliance and how we work with government to create results, visit our website at corneralliance.com. And then make sure to search for AI Government Future in Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Corner Alliance, thanks for listening.